everyone, and welcome. My name's James Harding. I am the editor and co-founder of Tortoise. And whether you're looking at us on a screen or you've joined us here in person, welcome to this, the first award ceremony of the Heywood Prize, the Heywood Prize 2021. We are extremely honoured as Tortoise to be here and hosting this. If you don't know about us, we're a slow newsroom. We were set up a couple of years ago in the hope that you could do news that wasn't about breaking news, but about what was driving the news. And we wondered at the time whether you could set up a newsroom in the spirit of radical optimism. And perhaps for that reason, it would make sense that we would be a place that we could come to celebrate this extraordinary initiative to try and think through the ways in which we can improve our government and the way the country works, and to honour Jeremy Heywood, a person who seemed to me always in that combination of intelligence and diligence in his organised thoughtfulness to embody a spirit of radical optimism, a willingness to see if government could always try to do something differently and do something better. And so it makes sense that we're here talking about a set of ideas. I know you'll hear from Suzanne Heywood in a moment about quite how inundated she and the Heywood Prize have been with new ideas for what government can do. Before we get into that, and before I actually hand over to Suzanne, I just wanted to show you a video that gives you some sense, I hope, of the work that's gone into this. Have a look.
Hard boy. Yeah, so Jeremy was, of course, an extraordinary, sparkling guy with amazing overview and work ethic, but he had this remarkable intellectual openness. So we worked together on lots of quite now well-known policy. We worked together on the sugar levy or e-cigarettes, which he was a great champion of. And, you know, sitting there with the Prime Minister and Jeremy arguing about these things. And I can remember actually when we first brought an e-cigarette into a meeting with Jeremy, so waving him around a decade ago, saying, we think this might be a really good idea rather than a bad idea. Why are we about to regulate them out of existence? And Jeremy's openness to that kind of ideas. There were crazier ones, but maybe I'll spare you them, but that's a real one which happened. And by the way, e-cigarettes have probably saved more than 1 million years of life in Britain since the change. I mean, it's a huge effect.
I was really impressed with the number of responses and also the enormous variety.
I thought the volume was fantastic.
And you don't really have that opportunity to speak to 1,900 different people with 1,900 different ideas. It's not that I saw all 1,900, but the ones that I did see, I thought, oh, that's unusual. Wouldn't have thought of that.
So one of the interesting things about the Heywood Prize is we had 2 different questions, which is first of all, just to get out of people, what's a challenge or opportunity? And then separately, what might be a solution to it? You're better off to have even questions that don't have answers than answers that you can't question.
Very fundamentally, it's been a very difficult period, I know, for many people. But coming out of this is a moment, and Jeremy would have grasped this moment, to think quite fundamentally about how we change our public sector and how we make it better for the future.
We should say thank you to the army of helpers who sifted through these very, very many, nearly 2,000 entries.
So from my perspective, the wider your lens, the more chance you've got of catching something really interesting.
People who are living and breathing and existing within the policies that we put in place, their ideas and thoughts are always worth hearing.
One of the things that I think really hooked me in was when we first met and Suzanne was sharing some of her thoughts. She talked about Jeremy's view of inclusion of thought. She wanted different people who think differently to obviously submit them, but also to review them.
But if that's the legacy, then I think from my perspective, that's really something special.
So the chance that one of mine might get through is slim, but I'm rooting for them.
So I'm going to hand over to Suzanne Heywood and tell us a little bit, Suzanne, about what's gone into the Heywood Prize.
Thank you so much, James. Well, it's incredibly exciting to be here this evening because we finally are going to be able to unveil the winners of the Heywood Prize. And I just wanted to say before we started a little bit about the process that we've been through. We had, as a couple of people have mentioned, almost 2,000 entries to this prize. And these entries came from not just across the UK, but from across the globe. We actually had entries from countries right across the world. We had entries from all sorts of different people. We had entries from people who were in hospital who wrote entries. I spoke to a 90-something-year-old gentleman who wrote an entry all about how difficult it was to contact the NHS. We had entries from all sorts of people in all sorts of different walks of life. And for me, that's incredibly exciting because I know that Jeremy always believed that the best ideas come from those who are passionate about public policy, but a little bit outside and therefore able to challenge the system. So we got these 2,000 ideas, and then, as David mentioned in that opening video, we had we had to recruit a large number of people to sift those entries, and we ended up with almost 100 people who kindly volunteered their time to sift those entries. And we did that in a very randomized way. So all of those people were sent small bundles of entries in a very randomized order. They had no idea who those entries were from. They didn't have any names. They didn't know what sex they were. They didn't know where they came from. And through that process, all of the entries got read. All the best entries got read multiple times. And then we had a fantastic panel of judges who went through the final entries and selected the winners here tonight. And I think we have some fantastic winners. So I'm not really going to say any more. I think we're on to the competition.
Well, we are, Suzanne. Although I have to say, the thing that I think is amazing about it is you must have thought when you started this process, the fear would be you would announce the Heywood Prize, you would invite people to rethink the way in which things work, and nothing would come, no one would write in. And the opposite happened. Of course, you had 2,000, then you had to work out how you sift through them all. I was taught once by a very, very fabled reporter, a guy called David Broder of the Washington Post. And the best questions you can ask are big and open, as in what's on your mind. And the thing that's brilliant about this first question, and we're about to hear from the winner, is it was such a big and challenging and open question, and I imagine you had a huge range of answers. But I feel very flattered and a little bit nervous, actually. I'm now in a position where I get to announce who is the winner of the 2021 Heywood Prize, the answer to question one. And the winner is Christopher Spencer-Jones. Before you hear from Christopher, I'm just going to play a short film just to give you a sense of what Christopher's idea is.
I'm Christopher Spencer-Jones. With the pandemic, governments did something very unprecedented and closed all schools. The response of schools varied, but the best schools quickly switched to online learning. The idea that that could be generalized was picked up, and by the autumn of 2020, nearly all schools were making an online offer. It seems to me that this has broken the mold. We have a new way of delivering teaching that is relevant in a variety of situations, not least future pandemic situations, but when it snows and children can't get to school, when children are sick and can't get to school, when there are children who would benefit by looking at learning materials that are historic, if they've missed school for some reason. There seem to be a lot of settings where recorded material, which we now have in abundance, could be very useful.
So Christopher, many congratulations.
Thank you.
It's lovely to meet you. And I'm feeling very pleased because you were one of the, you had my vote. It's fascinating because obviously the last year has been actually incredibly traumatic for so many people and families and businesses. What's so fantastic about your proposal, your idea, is actually it speaks to an opportunity and innovation that's come out of the pandemic. Can you talk a bit more about your thinking, a bit more about what spurred you to this particular idea?
I'm a compulsive thinker, and I've worked a lot of my life in the public sector, usually implementing public policy, sometimes not very willingly, always wanting to improve and looking for ways and finding ways of influencing public policy. So this is slightly familiar territory for me. It's a virus that's infected me. So I enjoyed reading about the prize and then making the submission. I will use one of Jeremy's questions, which is, where are we with this? And the point is, we are in a different place than we were 2 years ago with teaching. It was always in the classroom. Now we've had extensive experience of children accessing their teacher online from home. It's been unequally provided, unequally taken up, and that inequality issue is part of what needs to be addressed by picking up this opportunity.
And inequality, it's a very strong theme in the proposal, and you talk particularly about how this might benefit families, children from disadvantaged backgrounds and refugees. Yeah. Again, can you elaborate a little bit more about your thinking?
Well, some parents pay a lot of money for their children to go to a fee-paying school, seeking the best for their children, and those schools provide all sorts of things that are to the benefit of a child's development. One of the key aspects of education, though, is classroom. Well, why would not we give all children access to the best classroom teaching? And I think there's quite a long way to go from where we are now to achieving that as an outcome. But I kind of get an idea it's possible, and there may be the willpower to do it. There's the odd fact that we've got roughly 24,000 schools in the country. Mainly, it's been schools doing it for their own pupils live in the lesson time. That needs to be thought of. There's a huge resource there now. Can we loosen that so it's not just for a school? Can we loosen it so that it's looked at in terms of what it can do to address diversity, so that it's choice and contestability, to go back to Jeremy Heywood's heartland, which I live in that same country where we want to improve things for everybody, and the means is choice and contestability.
I mean, I love the idea that the best maths teacher in the UK might actually be able to do a lesson virtually for hundreds or thousands of
but it may
students.
not be the best teacher for one of your children. One of your children
They're very
might
difficult. especially number two.
But so they might want something slightly different. And the point is, you don't need to have one channel on this. You don't have to have one best maths teacher. Some people want to be taught by a particular sex or a particular background. Well, we can do that, can't we? We can make it so that the child learns what they need to learn to make something of themselves and end up contributing to our society, making this place better.
I mean, it's a lovely sort of element of personalisation there. You and I are both former civil servants. You've suggested that we should stop using the term retired civil servants, which I love. So former civil servants, you know what it's like to advise ministers and to turn policy into something real. So if Gavin Williamson were in the room today, or perhaps the head of the National Union of Teachers, and the job was to sort of persuade them to take this tremendous idea and turn it into a practical help for our children, for our pupils, for our students from, I don't know, September 2022. How would you persuade them?
No, I would start by finding out where they are now, and they might not be receptive this evening. I'd wait for another opportunity, because this is all about timing and frame it where we are. I think one of the beauties of something that the Heywood Prize is to put things forward, and that gives an opportunity. But things don't often work on the first opportunity. It needs work. It needs people. It needs people to tune in and pick up. And heavens above, one thing I learned was
don't ever think it's my idea, because it's guaranteed to fail.
It's
always Gavin's idea. Yeah, or it's somebody else's idea. And that way one sees things succeed. And that's a pleasure. That's what I've had a lot of pleasure in my working life. And it's always been by making other people look good who want to look good.
No quotes here. I thought another really interesting aspect of the proposal is how holistic it is. So you also talk implicitly about the digital divide, and this is partly about access to teaching, but actually it's also access to broadband and computers. Again, what was as you think about how we make the join between the education system, between telecoms companies, my old world, to really deliver a holistic program for children that's available in the Orkneys as it is potentially in inner city London. Were you also very thoughtful about that join between the digital divide, but also access to great teaching?
Well, it's got to be practical, and it's probably got to be cheaper, and then it will win if it fits in with a political way of thinking, an initiative that can be announced in the House to some applause, at least from the back benches. So it's about practicalities, and to me, it's to put an idea out, test to see if it can be turned into a vision. So I think there are other people involved here who are better placed than I am to try and build the vision. I'm very happy to be part of building my vision, or anybody else's, come to that. But if it captures the imagination that we think, yes, it's obvious that we can do it, it's obvious we should do it, why aren't we doing it? Let's get on and do it.
That's a great place to end. Let's just get on and do it. And I think that would be something I think would be very dear to Jeremy's heart as well. Let's just do it. Christopher, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I think it's a fantastic,
very kind,
fantastic idea. And
it's not my idea.
I think
I picked it up from the ether, I assure you.
The sooner some of our politicians take it up, I think the better our children will be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very kind.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you. I should say congratulations to Gavin Williamson for an amazing idea.
Absolutely, send him the check.
Thank you very much indeed, and Sharon, thank you. Christopher, I must say that, and Sharon, I should just say that listening to the two of you, I tell you what was a real masterclass was also understanding how civil servants work with ministers. Your answer, which is, I would wait to see whether it was the right time to raise the idea, a kind of emotional intuition and patience around an idea is a lesson in itself. So thank you very much, and many congratulations. The second question, and as you remember, the Heywood Prize comes in two parts, and the second question is itself a two-parter. It's in the case of the problem, how do you fix it? In the case of the opportunity, how do you capitalize on it? And we're going to announce tonight the three winners of many, many people who put in their proposals and their ideas, and that were sifted by so many of those Heywood Prize sifters. And so it's my pleasure to move to that second question and announce the person who comes in the third place. I'm delighted to announce that that is James Bayliss, and you're going to be able to listen to what his entry is right now.
My name is James Bayliss. I'm a volunteer, but unfortunately due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my role was cut short because of accessibility issues and having certain people in the building. So unfortunately I've remained unemployed since last March. I left university in 2012. When I'm at university, I'm really well supported, but I have been well supported, in terms of personal support, to access education from the age of 5 until the age of 22. I was supported. Then when I went back to university again, the support came back, and during my 2 years at Leicester University to do my master's degree, I had the support. But in between times, there was just nothing, or very, very limited support, because I was reading an article in The Guardian, and they said disabled people leave university in the dark. The day they graduate, it's the day everything stops, and then you have to sort of start again.
So my name's Amika George, and I have the absolute pleasure of talking to the brilliant James, who is our third runner-up for question 2. Hi, James.
Good evening, Amika.
So firstly, I want to say a huge congratulations on your incredible idea and for being our third runner-up. I'm actually a student myself, and I've just graduated. Well, my graduation's technically on Saturday, fingers crossed I actually graduate. And I am faced at this kind of crossroads of what I do next and what it looks like to enter the world of employment. And I'm a non-disabled person, and I find that stressful enough without the kind of structural barriers that I'm sure you're faced with. So I wanted to say I was really moved by your idea, and I have no doubt that its implementation will really benefit the 14.1 million people in the UK who are disabled, as well as changing the discourse and culture around disability more broadly. So a huge congratulations. I wanted to ask you firstly a bit about yourself, about your story, and kind of what led you to this idea.
So I was born in 1989, and soon after birth they discovered that I had cerebral palsy. So basically that meant that that was going to be a problem for the rest of my life. So when I first started going to school, they said to my parents, "Oh, James, going to mainstream school." We're not sure, but because the Disability Discrimination Act was just about to come in at that time in 1995. So it was like, James going to mainstream schools. My parents pushed for it, and I went to mainstream school. And I got supported, and I was supported then all the way through mainstream, all the way to university. But despite that, I met a lot of challenges along the way. Like for example, despite being disabled, I used to take part in PE, fully actively take part in PE. I used to do GCSE PE, and I took part in games, and then I got a C, which they didn't think was going to happen. I took part in cross country, even though they didn't want me to do so, and again, at degree level, I was fully supported. There was DSA, this great support. And then suddenly when I finished university, I started to look for jobs. They went, "You haven't got enough experience. Your disability is going to be difficult." That's what I sort of got. You haven't got enough experience, because I've been doing voluntary work, but it wasn't enough, that sort of thing. So I hit a brick wall, and I kept hitting that brick wall.
Amazing. And please tell us about your idea. I think it's a brilliant one, as I said, that would benefit so many people. But would you be able to give us a kind of outline of what it would look like in its practical implementation?
So basically what would happen is that when people go to university, because right now a lot of people go to university, and as you know, you have very long summer holidays. So my thought was, well, why don't we do what we do at school for disabled people when we're at university? So that's offering them, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of, voluntary work, supported, so they can meet employers in their field, so they could get some experience, get some exposure, talk about their needs, and then what my idea was to take further than that when they graduate, because a lot of people, there was a Guardian article saying that a lot of people graduate in the dark, where basically the support just dies on day 5 of day 1 of the graduation. Once you shake hands on that stage, you're done. You do get a bit of career support, but you don't get any of the intensive support that you had. So my support was that we could let people go into, say for example, I live in Leicester, so it'd be Leicester City Council. Go in, say, on a full-time but voluntary basis. Get a graduate scheme going that people can go in on a voluntary basis. So the person actually, the government's supporting the person with disabilities on benefits for now, but they're getting the experience so that the benefits don't last for long. Because I've been on ESA, PIT, for 9 years, and that's a long time, And when I go into jobs, because I have been doing voluntary work, I have not been doing nothing, not doing anything, but I've been doing voluntary work for so long. I've worked with Scope. I think I've worked with Shelter Housing, the Salvation Army, to name a few. But to go into the jobs that I graduated for, which was a master's in international relations, and my original degree was a BA in politics, they say you're not experienced enough. So what I need is to be going into the field that I graduated with, so I can get into the jobs that I would like to do.
Amazing. And one thing that you mentioned in your entry was the kind of lack of accessibility in the workplace or in offices at the kind of before the COVID-19 lockdown, which was then kind of transformed as everyone was working remotely. And I found that really interesting, that perhaps that's kind of a lesson for us going forward into kind of the new world post-COVID and post-lockdown. Yeah. I wondered how else you think we can make post-COVID Britain better for the disabled community, and if you have any other ideas that you'd love to see implemented.
I mean, in terms of the workplace, if you've got somebody in a wheelchair that needs to transfer to go to the toilet, for example, they're going to find that there's often not a place, a hoist system. So if they're working from home, which we've now found is possible, because before we weren't so sure if that was possible. Somebody working from home, they could have their care at home, whilst still being able to work. That opens new doors, which is exciting. But because also I'd like to see accessibility. And I mean, I'm hoping for driverless cars, because it would really help disabled people, because improving public transport, spaces on trains for people in wheelchairs, and accessibility and seating on the tube, for example. I mean, if I go to London on the tube and it's rush hour, I have to hang on to that pole for dear life, because I'm not very stable on my feet, and if it goes fast, then I'm going somewhere.
Amazing. And lastly, what would it mean for you personally if to see kind of in a year's time this idea implemented and every disabled person supported in that really tricky transition from university to the workplace?
For me, it would be brilliant, because then people won't have to have my experience, because my experience has been difficult, because I think I've been up to 2,000 job applications and 200 interviews roughly, and just didn't get anywhere. So because I don't want people to have to sit there through the stress, because applying for a job, if you've ever done it, is very stressful anyway. To do 2,000, then go to 200 interviews and just get no, it's very disheartening. So I'd like people to not feel, because then you just sort of end up going on a tangent, because I went back to university to do law, didn't get on with that, went back to university to do a master's degree. I kept climbing higher and higher and higher, and kept getting stuck at every level, because more and more disabled people are going higher and higher and higher and getting stuck. And then we're going to end up with people, which we need the talent. People with disabilities have brilliant memories. People with Asperger's syndrome particularly have specialists in certain areas that we're not using. We can use this talent.
Amazing. A huge congratulations, James. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Amika, as well. Thank you very much. I'm sure people watching that will be struck by something else. I'm sure, Suzanne, you'll have been struck too, that there's a quality there, which is not just the idea, but also just listening to James, the tenacity. I mean, that's just been extraordinary. So thank you, James, for talking to us, and thank you, Amika, for bringing out that and enabling us to understand the range of James's experience and what's informed his idea. We come to the next, the second prize in that second question. I'm delighted to announce that the second place winner is Andrew Beale. Let's have a look at his film.
My name is Andrew Beale, and I work in the international development sector, so non-profits. So the idea for my entry is to integrate the concept of citizens' assemblies deeply and permanently into our political structure by making it the fourth pillar, if you like, of our political structure. We already have the judiciary, we have the legislature, and we have the executive. So I want to implement citizens' assemblies alongside those three elements. And just saw it as an outlet to maybe see if one of my wild ideas could get a wider audience.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello there. Hi. Good evening.
Hi, Andrew. Nice to meet you. I'm Mustafa. I was one of the judges. I'm
Mustafa.
Co-founder of DeepMind, and I'm a VP of AI at Google. And one of the things that I was particularly excited about with your proposal is the way that you framed the problem. You really talked about the challenge of polarization that we see in society today, and how people feel disconnected from politics and frustrated that they're unable to have an influence in between elections. So I thought maybe we'd start by having you say a little bit more about that context and scene setting for your proposal.
Yes. So, I think a lot of this maybe thoughts on this topic started roughly at the same time for a lot of people, but during the the lead up to the Brexit referendum, however you voted in that, I'm not sure how many people could say that the quality of the debate that led to whatever decision people made was very high in this country. And yeah, so I saw that as an issue, and then I realized that, for even during the normal election cycle, that the citizens really only have the elections as their contact points with trying to align politicians and representatives' actions with our desires and priorities, if you like. And citizens' assemblies are a hugely powerful tool for helping people find common ground, disparate groups of people to find common ground, and then make considered decisions, and hopefully, not guaranteed, but hopefully, vote on some recommendations which satisfy a greater number of people, and perhaps provide a stronger foundation for the future, sort of longer lasting decisions, if you like. So it once we bring at an election cycle our representatives more into line with us, over the next few years, those representatives can be influenced by a vast number of groups. There's lobbying of all sorts of different types and donations, which can pull them away from the promises that were made to us. And that sort of lobbying happens all the time, I imagine. There's good lobbying and bad lobbying, and totally above board, laudable lobbying, and some, maybe we imagine, some backroom deals. But what's missing from all these types of lobbying is the general public as an informed whole, pushing ideas up from the bottom and actually demanding that our representatives work on certain things, maybe in a particular priority. The promises that are made to us are top-down manifesto promises from, a limited range of parties because of the first past the post situation. All our eggs are in one basket. We have to plump for one particular party. And so I wanted to kind of even up this lobbying as well. And so that's where the idea of regular citizens' assemblies came from, and where the topics could be those issues facing society which are judged to be perhaps divisive, or you could even have another type of citizens' assembly whose job it is to pull ideas from the public and then put those into a priority and feed them into specialist citizens' assemblies that would deal with each topic. So I mean, being on the receiving end of a citizens' assemblies recommendations might not be as fun for our representatives as a nice lunch or a foreign holiday, but hopefully it would carry the weight of being from an open and transparent process, from a group of people who represent the population as a whole, and a really well-informed section of the population.
I mean, that's right. I mean, one of the things I really liked about your proposal was that the focus on trust building and the optimism that comes with that, the optimism that with a slightly slower pace and with more time, citizens who are active and care about participating in the political process can get sufficiently well informed to actually make a meaningful contribution to politics outside of just elections. And obviously that takes time, it takes slowness, it takes being informed. And I really admired that kind of optimistic outlook for the direction that we need to head in. Can you say a bit more about how you imagine or how you may have seen those sorts of processes unfolding in the past? So I know that citizens' assemblies in different forms have been around in other sorts of proposals for a while. I think what's interesting about this is the time taken to really deliberate collectively.
Yes, exactly. I've not been in a citizens' assembly myself. I'd love to participate. I've read a bit about them. There's one going on in my local borough in Lambeth in London for climate change right now. And several London boroughs have climate change related citizens' assemblies going on. I think my interest in this was piqued during the Irish abortion referendum some years back, where they used a citizens' assembly to feed information into the public, which was that could then be acted on by the public, digested by the public, all the arguments understood, and then the public could vote one way or the other in the actual referendum. So one of the, it seems to me, very powerful aspects of a citizens' assembly is the fact that it's a little bit like jury service. People get pulled together randomly from the population, but in a very structured way, because you want the assembly to represent the population as a whole, so that it's represented in microcosm. But then there's an education process, so people get educated from all the different viewpoints surrounding that particular topic. So they can take that all into account, and then they deliberate, talk amongst themselves, pull other people in, and that's very carefully moderated so that strident voices don't dominate the discussion, and people who, may be a little shyer about speaking up are encouraged to. So and people would learn about the topic, they would learn about their fellow citizens, they would learn about a process that can help people overcome divisions and bubbles and fragmentation in society, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, hugely powerful. Not just for the people in the audience, in the assembly, but for the people receiving it, for the people watching the process unfold, because another key aspect is they're very transparent, or should be. So yeah, it just got me really excited. It seemed like if we could deepen our democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, if you look at how things have been over the last 18 months with the pandemic, the number of people who put themselves forward to volunteer and to participate and be part of society was, I think, really overwhelming and very surprising and exciting. And in many ways, I feel like a proposal like this can really build on a lot of that momentum, because people gain so much just from learning from one another by going through a process like this, aside from the sort of factual information that they get from dealing with the topic. The act of participating with fellow citizens to contribute, I think, is really, really meaningful and has lots of other, great broader benefits for society.
Yeah, I think it would re-enfranchise a lot of people because the assemblies are balanced demographically. You would get groups who perhaps feel marginalized able to have a voice and know that will be heard and reported up to the powers that be, but also some other just general population who might be a bit dissatisfied with the way they see politics going. This would really be a way of re-engaging. And all sorts of benefits flow from that.
One of the really nice parts of your proposal is that there's a requirement to respond from a minister or government department, and I really like that emphasis on accountability, that even if a proposal from a citizens' assembly is rejected, there's a requirement to explain why. obviously that's pretty important. Can you say a bit more about why you included that?
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, the recommendations would be made, and the government of the day would need to formally respond to that with an argument, for or against, partially or in full. You'd like it to be accepted, that would be great. But if not, then at least it's all about this alignment between the electorate and our representatives, that it forms an auditable point where the electorate can look back and say, well, we asked for this and we were turned down or we were accepted. And when the next election cycle comes, then it's relatively easy to look back at these assemblies and see how the government followed it. And you can see, whether you feel that they are acting for you and also not just for you, because you've become part of this informed whole, whether they're acting for what you see as in the best interests of society.
Well, a fourth pillar for our political structure is a very bold proposal and exactly the kind of thing that the Heywood Prize were looking for. So thank you very much and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much, Mustafa. It's really great. Actually, I would love to have had that conversation go on, not least because actually listening to Andrew talk about some of those citizens' assemblies in boroughs remind me of the quality of a citizen assembly, which is not just that point about community and citizenship, but about place. And you're struck, if you've listened to Christopher, to James, to Andrew, and the conversations we've had this evening, that for some of us who are getting perhaps a little weary of this very long pandemic year, that there are plenty of people who've been inspired to have quite profoundly different views about the way the world could work, the way our country could work. And as you said, Mustafa, a fourth pillar to our democracy seems to be a good takeaway from this long, difficult year. In fact, each of the ideas seems to me to have been actually rather inspired and electrified by what we've seen in the last year, so that can be no small thing. I say that because I now have the great pleasure of announcing the winner, the first place to the answer to question 2, and that is Geoffrey Crukshanks. Geoffrey's going to join us from Brussels, but first you're going to hear from his idea.
My name is Geoff Crukshanks. I live in Brussels, where I've worked for more than 20 odd years for DHL and later Deutsche Post DHL as head of legal. I'm now semi-retired. Yeah, that's me. My entry to the Heywood Prize was to suggest the creation of a territorial army or something akin to that for the NHS. That's to say, creation of a team of reservists who are trained and skilled and able to devote some time to the NHS in a specific role in which they're trained at times of seasonal stress or epidemic or pandemic or times of emergency, whether man-made or natural disasters.
Geoffrey, congratulations on behalf of all the judges and everybody watching on winning the prize, coming first. I have to say that we all spent very many hours sifting through huge numbers of entries, and you won because yours stood out and jumped out to all of us. I remember sitting talking with Sharon White about what we were looking for, and your proposal just kind of ticked every box. So huge congratulations. The thing I'd like to ask first is, what is it about you, Geoffrey Crukshanks, in Brussels with your past career? What was it about you which came to this idea? Where were you? Were you in the bath? Were you watching TV? Were you watching a press conference? What was the thing which sparked this thought in you?
Well, I have no specific connection to the idea. Nothing in my employment history or experience leads me down this path. But as I'm sure my wife would testify, I sit in front of the TV quite a lot and rant and rave like a character from a Harry Enfield sketch, saying, "Oh no, what they should do is this, what they should do is that." And this, while I was watching the agony of the NHS go through the early stages of the pandemic, looking at the stress, the shortage of staff, the unbelievable stress these people were under, it just seemed to me this is kind of translating it into a sort of military context. This is exactly what the territorial army was sort of designed to do. In moments of stress and national emergency, there is a force of people, a reserve force, who are trained and ready to come in, step in and help. And so that was the idea. And like, many sort of rants that I have, or unlike many rants that I have, I then heard about the Heywood Prize, and it was just a wonderful platform to kind of unload these ideas. And it was quite cathartic, actually, I never expected to win, not for a minute, but it was just a sort of cathartic exercise in just unloading your ideas, thinking through them perhaps in a little bit more detail. And, that's really why I did it. But there's nothing about me that gives me any inside track on this.
And just to be clear, this is not a territorial army which is just there waiting for the next pandemic to come along, is it? It's more practical than that, more immediate.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think there are always, we hear about them all the time, there are seasonal stresses in the NHS. There are, moments of crisis, perhaps caused by natural disasters or man-made disasters or acts of terrorism, where suddenly the whole NHS is under stress. And I think the point about this is it's the NHS itself who knows where the stress points are. They know what they need. They know where they need more people with certain skills, so they can identify them, and hopefully at the same time identify the sort of discrete areas of training, specialized training, that will help this reserve force to appear and be able to do something useful. So that's really what it is. It's not just a case of let's everybody volunteer and do what they can. It's having people standing by and getting ready to do something at a time when it's needed, and when it is not, the timing is not predictable, but the event itself is somewhat predictable. And as you say, it has a very seasonal element as well.
I have to tell you, I have sat with Jeremy Heywood for very many hours having these kind of conversations. We had two different budget pots called the Capital Modernisation Fund, the Investor Save Budget, which Treasury civil servants never liked because they weren't sure this kind of process was the best way to use money. But Jeremy loved it because it was a way to find new ideas and things you could try out and do differently. And I know he would have alighted upon this idea because it's practical. It has a link to public service. It solves a multitude of problems. It's flexible. But I think he'd have had some questions for you. So if we're in the room, I'm sitting there with Jeremy, and Jeremy's going to say, Geoffrey, you've come with this idea, but I need to know. You're saying that people are going to step in and do maybe some specialist jobs. How will we persuade the NHS that these volunteers can come in and perform quite specialist tasks, which otherwise people might be graduates with a long history of training before they get the chance to do it?
Well, I think, part of it is, I think the short answer to the question is because the NHS, those people, the skeptics themselves, will have worked alongside some of the reservists during their training and, during times of stress. They will hopefully have had a fair bit of input into the content of the training and the delivery of the training. And they can see on the ground that there is a sort of very practical element. And when somebody walks in through the door, it's not like training somebody who's training somebody who's starting from day one. They've already got that experience. I think, I would foresee sort of basic training for everybody, just sort of on the ethics and the basics of working for the NHS, working in caring for people medically. But then there would be, based on people's competence, their aptitude, there would be very specific training for certain people to do certain jobs. And if they didn't achieve a certain level, then they wouldn't actually be added to the reserve force anyway. So I think it would quickly gain credibility.
Okay, tick from Jeremy. Second question, you say that it should be aimed mainly at young people, but actually there's loads of people, retiring people with huge experience who actually are living for, for very many years. Shouldn't we be drawing, people in their 50s, 60s, even 70s into this reserve force? I mean, I think young people's great, but does it need to be only young people?
No, it doesn't, of course. And I think certainly where you've got people who have got medical experience, I mean, they've obviously got a head start and they're ready to step in and do something specific and helpful. I think, the aspect of young people is, I think there are other sort of societal benefits here. We've got a lot of people working in the gig economy. They, they don't have permanent employment. They're not really anchored to a sort of way of life that other than sort of, working casually, delivering things or picking things up or working in hospitality or whatever. I think these people have the flexibility at a time in their life, and they would gain something from it as well. So I think it's benefiting younger people as well as adding capacity and service to the NHS itself. Right. So that's why I think young people are probably the primary source. But no, I agree completely. There should be no age limits to this at all.
Yeah. So capacity, flexible, able to respond to the way in which the employment world is changing. But there's also quite an important element of citizenship here as well, isn't there? Of public service. Is that how do you see that developing? Because I know Jeremy would be very keen on that aspect too.
Well, yes, absolutely. I think everybody, almost everybody, cares about their country, cares about society, wants to make a contribution. Many of us early on go into a career which sort of leads down to a sort of dark and specialized place where we never sort of see the light of day, lawyers, bankers, accountants, whatever. I think if you can offer people the opportunity to take some time out from their sort of cloistered day-to-day life and put them into a situation where they're a real life situation where they're helping other people, they see crises, it will bring another dimension to their life. It will allow them to contribute to something to society. I think it will, make them feel as though they are stakeholders in society. So I think it sort of will help round out people in that way as well.
Jeremy would also ask, is it costed? Do we know how much it would cost? Where's the money going to come from?
Well, I don't have any answers for Jeremy on that one. All I will say is it ought to save money, because I think you can, I think a huge amount of money is spent on training NHS people anyway, many of whom sort of drift in and out. I'm sure huge amounts of money get spent with nursing agencies, medical agencies, and we've all read about the huge costs that involves. So I think it'll, there are sort of obvious savings there. So I would think it would cover itself. It would cover its own costs very quickly. That's a bit of an expectation. That's an expectation and a hope, but I don't have a sort of fully costed answer for you, I'm afraid.
That's fine. That's what the Treasury's for. But I think the reason we like this idea is because it's simple and innovative and practical. But it was the only idea like this for the NHS in which really stood out to all of us and is doable. And I guess my final question is, what would you like to happen next? In an ideal world, what would you like to happen with your idea?
Well, I would like the head of the health, the NHS and the Minister of Health, I hear we've got a new one these days, to actually sit down and perhaps with a working group, look at the practicalities and see, whether it can work or not. I would imagine, just a gut feel, but I think with the right promotional campaign, the recruitment campaign, I think the response to this would be enormous. I think, we hear of people who are actually drawn into the NHS, who are thinking of a career in the NHS anyway. And again, I think another benefit is this is a sort of a career opportunity for people to sort of put a foot into that particular pool, see if they like the water, whether it's something they could devote their lives to, rather than placing the whole bet, at a time when let's face it, none of us know anything at the start of our careers, and it's all a bit of a guess. So I think it would, I think by drawing people in like that way, by getting it properly sort of debated, costed, as you say, I think it would have hopefully a good chance of succeeding.
Well, look, I hope people are listening, and I hope that there are some next steps which flow from this. There was a huge effort done by so many sifters, and thanks to all of them and to everybody who entered. But for us judges, we spent very many hours on this, and yours emerged, and I think you are pretty much at the top of all of our lists. It's simple, but it's really doable, and I hope we can. And on behalf of all of us and the foundation, Geoffrey, huge congratulations on being the very first, the inaugural winner of the Heywood Prize.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say, apart from being delighted and surprised, I'm hugely honoured to win a prize, win anything that's associated with Jeremy Heywood. I know a little bit about the man. I know he was remarkable in what he did, his contributions for public policy and for governance, and it's a massive honour to be a winner of this prize. I'm very grateful for the judges and for the Heywood Trust itself. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you both. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jeff. To be honest with you, I was just having much too much fun just watching that. It was a TV show of itself. I also realised that you never see a good, muscular interview of an Oscar winner, but you do at the Heywood Prize. When the person wins, they get put through their paces and they're asked whether or not their idea is properly costed, as it should be. I also wanted to say it's one of those great pleasures when you hear an idea, and of course, like pretty much all of us here, we didn't know who the winner was, and when you hear the idea and you immediately think that is an electric idea, exactly as Ed just said, it's an idea that makes sense and that can be done. And to an extent, I'm looking at Suzanne here, I suppose the thing that strikes me is that this whole process is a citizens' assembly of its own. It's a chance for people to come and say, well, we could do things differently. And the challenge that it's set for 2022 is that we're going to have to come back here next year and figure out, or at least report back, what actually happened. Because, if you heard Geoff Crukshanks' idea, your real question will be this time next year, what happened? What happened to it? There were, as Suzanne said right at the beginning, this incredible number of people who came up with ideas, and not everyone could win, but there were some really exceptional ones, and the judges want to make sure that those were recognised too. So on the screen now, you'll see the list of other people that the judges wanted to make sure were recognised. So the real question, obviously, that everyone's asking is, how come the Return of the Jedi didn't win this year's 2021 Heywood Prize? I'm going to make sure to ask Suzanne Heywood later, or maybe the person I'm going to introduce you to now can put that to you. Sarah Sands, all of you, or many of you will know, newspaper editor, Today programme editor, great culture champion, Sherpa of the gender agenda at the G7, and one of our country's great humans. Sarah, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, and it's so great to have Suzanne. And I'm just thinking of your book about Jeremy. What does Jeremy think? And it was the book really went to his role as a public servant, and so I just wonder what that's been like for you, listening to the kind of ideas and thinking what it would have been like to have had him, coming through the door saying, "I've just heard this idea," because that's what you describe so wonderfully in your book.
Well, I think if Jeremy was here, he'd be absolutely delighted, because we've just seen that incredible list. I mean, not only our 3 prize winners, but an incredible list of runners-up who had all sorts of really, really interesting ideas. And I think what he'd be doing is something he used to do every time we went out and met anybody at all, would be he'd be sending off messages all around Whitehall about now, saying, here's an idea, what are you going to do about it? And, you know, please message me back tomorrow and tell me what's happening. So he would be absolutely thrilled about just the innovation that's come out of this, which has been quite incredible.
Isn't it? It feels so uplifting, actually, doesn't it? As we were talking about the sort of effects of the COVID pandemic, but just that creative thinking and this sense of civil society that seems to be coming through. And one thing that we've talked about, Susanna and I, is how we develop these ideas, and that's come up. You've talked about timing or the framing of them, and so we have an opportunity in September event that's linked to this that we're calling modestly the Great Enlightenment, the New Enlightenment, so it's a sort of bunch of scientists, because we know that that's where the attention has been, but actually it's this as well. So it's a mix of policymakers and entrepreneurs and thinkers, and so Suzanne will come waving your ideas and seeing how we develop them. So I guess that's what the hope is for you from this prize, from that moment that you thought, what does Jeremy think, and how do we make his legacy real in this way? I mean, how do you see the legacy?
Well, I think the event that you mentioned is going to be a great opportunity for us to come back and look at some of those ideas. But one of the things that we're really determined to do, kind of coming out of this prize, is to make sure that as many of these ideas as possible are really properly considered by kind of governments and others. So we will be making available on the Heywood Foundation website after the ceremony this evening, or at least kind of within an hour or so, we'll make all of the top entries available so people can go and see them on the website. I think we're going to do it so that you can see the top 500, or you can cut it by the top 250, and you can search them so you can look at all those ideas. We'll obviously put all the winners up on the website as well so people can see those, and we'll do a link to this evening's event. But we're going to go further than that. We're also going to bundle up the ideas, and we're going to send the ideas out to all the relevant government departments so they have all the ideas. We're going to get them out to people like Apolitico, who will send them out to civil services across the world. And obviously we'll work with others like the LSE to make sure that they have these ideas, and the Blavatnik School in Oxford. So they have these ideas and they can pick them up and run with them. And I think in a moment we're going to hear from somebody in government who may be able to help us do some of that.
Let's do that.
All across the UK, COVID-19 has brought challenges to different communities, but it's also seen people coming together with new ideas, new ways of working, and new ways of building back better. I'm speaking to you from Stornoway in the Western Isles, where I've been talking to local people about their experiences of COVID-19, but also how they want to ensure that they can enjoy, like all of us, a better future. And some of the best ideas about how we can build that better future have been gathered by those who have been committed to keeping alive the memory of Jeremy Heywood, an amazingly distinguished public servant in whose name the Heywood Prize has been created. The Heywood Prize has attracted hundreds of entries from people across the United Kingdom. Disruptive, creative and groundbreaking ideas for how we can improve public service, how we can work better together, and how we can improve this whole country. Suzanne Heywood's brought together a fantastic team of judges to assess these amazing ideas. The very best of them will be studied by civil servants in my department, in the Cabinet Office, in order to make sure that we can turn these ideas into reality. So I'm so grateful to everyone who entered this competition, so grateful to Suzanne and all the judges of the Heywood Prize, and grateful to all of you for your commitment to Sir Jeremy's memory and to the spirit of public service.